My parents turned me away just 11 days after my husband's funeral. That same night, my in-laws took us in. Years later, I sold the ranch for $100 million, signed the deed over to my in-laws, and let my parents watch from the front row. My mother said it without looking at the car. "You need to figure your life out, Bate. I can't take on your problems right now." 11 days after I buried my husband, two one-year-olds strapped into car seats in my truck at the bottom of her driveway, $412 in my checking account. Which I knew exactly because I had counted it that morning in the gas station parking lot. Same way you count things when your hands need something to do and your brain has stopped working properly. I had driven 6 hours to get to that porch. I had packed what I could fit. I had told myself the whole way that she would say yes, because what else do you tell yourself when you have nowhere else to go and the person at the end of the drive is your mother? She watched me stand there, she watched me not say anything. Then she went back inside and the porch light clicked off and I stood in the dark for a moment with the sound of cicadas and the distant highway and two babies who didn't know yet that the world was not going to be what I promised them. I carried the car seats back to the truck, both of them, one at a time, the way you do when there's nobody to help. Then I sat in the driver's seat and I did not cry, which surprises me when I think about it now. I think I was too far past the place where crying is a response. I was operating on something more basic than emotion, pure forward motion, the animal need to find somewhere safe before dark. I drove to a BP station 4 miles down the road and I called Ruth Calloway, my mother-in-law, not to ask for anything. I want to be precise about that. I called her because I had run out of other options and I needed to hear a voice that would not make me feel like a problem to be managed. I didn't have a plan, I didn't have a script. When she picked up on the second ring, I said her name and then I couldn't say anything else for a moment. She said, "Bate, where are you?" I told her. She said, "Don't move." 41 minutes later, Walt Calloway's truck pulled into the BP lot and parked beside mine. And he got out in his work boots and his Carhartt jacket without a word of preamble and walked to my back door and started transferring car seats with the unhurried competence of a man who has never once done something halfway in his life. Ruth came around to my window. She had brought a blue star quilt, the one that had been on Daniel's childhood bed that she'd washed and folded and kept in the cedar chest for reasons I'd never asked about. She wrapped my daughter Claire in it right there under the fluorescent lights of a BP station at 9:00 at night, and she wrapped my son James in her own coat. And she pressed a warm casserole dish into my hands. She had brought a casserole dish. She had been cooking when I called. She had just picked it up and brought it, and she said 7 words. "Set 2 more plates, they're ours now. No conditions, no speech about adults managing their circumstances. No implication that this was temporary, that there would be a conversation later about timelines and arrangements. 7 words. I followed their tail lights 40 mi east into Cedar Hollow, Texas, and I did not look back at the highway behind me. That was 8 years ago. What happened between that night and the morning I'm going to tell you about is the actual story, longer and quieter and harder than any single moment in it. But you need to know about the porch first. You need to hold that porch light clicking off because everything that comes later is built on top of it. My name is Bate Calloway. I kept Daniel's name, which is the one that belongs on this land. I grew up outside Amarillo in a family that was functional in all the visible ways and hollow in the ways that take you decades to name. My father, Gary, managed a regional hardware distribution company. My mother, Diane, ran the household and the family's social presentation with the focused energy of someone who understood that appearances were a form of currency. My brother Travis, 2 years younger, easy smile, the kind of charm that reads as warmth until you've known him long enough to understand it's a tool, was the one who got the benefit of every doubt. I was the responsible one, which in families like mine means the one who gets the least help because you've demonstrated you don't need it. I met Daniel Calloway at 23 at a cattle auction in Levick, which is either the most Texas sentence ever written or the most romantic, depending on your perspective. He was tall and quiet and knew more about grass management and soil composition than anyone I'd ever met. We were married 11 months later. Walt and Ruth gave us 80 acres in Cedar Hollow as a wedding gift, raw land with a stock pond, a working well, and 1 barn that needed its roof replaced. Daniel and I spent 5 years building a quarter-horse breeding operation from that land. We worked alongside each other the way people work when they're building something that matters with total commitment without keeping score. By the time the twins arrived, we had 30 horses, a reputation that stretched 3 states, and a business plan for the next decade that we drafted on a yellow legal pad and argued over productively and revised twice. And then Daniel got a headache on a Tuesday morning in April that turned out to be a brain aneurysm, and he was gone by Thursday afternoon. And everything we had drafted on that yellow legal pad became something I would have to build without him. I was 29 years old with 2 12-month-olds in a horse operation that could not run without someone running it. I thought about calling my mother. I thought about it for 4 days. Then I packed the truck and drove to her porch. You know how that ended. The first year in Cedar Hollow, I want to be honest, nearly broke me in every way that isn't financial. Walt and Ruth gave us the room at the back of their farmhouse. The one with the window that looked out over the south pasture and the old oak that had a rope swing Daniel had apparently used until he was 14. I would put the twins down at night and sit at that window and have the specific experience of grief in close quarters, which is that you never escape it because you are always surrounded by the person you lost. His parents' faces, his mother's hands, his father's walk. Daniel was everywhere in that house, and I both needed that and could not always bear it. But Ruth would appear in the morning with coffee before I asked for it, and Walt would handle the feeding schedule when I was running on no sleep. And neither of them ever once made me feel like a burden or a guest. I was family. The twins were family. That was not a temporary classification pending review. You're going to rebuild it, Walt told me once, standing at the fence watching the horses. He said it the way he said everything, not as encouragement, as fact. Daniel built half of it. You built the other half, you know what you're doing. I did know what I was doing. It took me about 6 months to remember that. I hired my first employee in month 7. Marcus Torres, 24 years old, raised on a ranch outside Midland, the kind of worker who shows up 15 minutes early as a matter of character rather than strategy. He is still with me now and runs the breeding program with a level of expertise that has surpassed mine in the specific areas I let him run with. I hired my second employee in the 10th month and brought on my third by month 14. To grow the business, I secured a $47,000 small business loan from First National Bank of Cedar Hollow. The loan was approved by Carol Bridger, an agricultural lending officer with 19 years of experience, who carefully reviewed my business plan with the kind of attention that told me she truly understood the industry. I used the money to expand our stallion lineup and build a second training arena. By the end of year 3, the business was profitable. By year 5, it was doing exceptionally well. 7 years in, I had built something people were willing to drive across 4 states to experience, and it all stood on the 80 acres Walt and Ruth had given Daniel and me as a wedding gift. I built it the only way I knew how, with the determination of someone working for a person who would never get to see the finished result. Everything I did, every foal born, every training record entered into the books I did for Daniel, Travis called during the 3rd year. His fitness franchise, which had expanded to 3 locations across the DFW Metroplex and relied heavily on social media branding, was losing money much faster than even he expected. That alone said a lot about his approach to finances. He asked for a $90,000 bridge loan, just for 12 months, he said. Family terms. Then he gave that familiar easy laugh that always sounded like the problem had already been solved. I let the silence hang before answering. Travis, I help people who showed up. His laugh disappeared. What does that mean? It means exactly what it sounds like. His voice softened into the calm, reasonable tone he always used when trying to rewrite history. That was a hard time for everyone. Mom and Dad were, I remember exactly what they were. You can't keep holding one bad moment against the whole family. It wasn't one moment. I had 1-year-old twins in my truck, $400 to my name, and Mom turned off the porch light. You're being dramatic. No, I'm being accurate. There's a difference, he said. Family should forgive. I told him forgiveness and lending money were 2 completely different things. He had no response because he knew I was right. I ended the call and went back to the barn. The barn had always made far more sense than conversations like that. The email arrived by accident. Travis meant to forward it to Mom but accidentally entered my address instead. Mistakes happen. This one cost him more than he realized. The forwarded message included 6 years of email history that nobody had bothered to delete. I scrolled through it looking only for context. Then I saw my name. A few weeks after Daniel died, judging by the timestamps, and shortly after I had driven away from my parents' house that night, my mother had written, "Taking her in would be throwing good money after bad." She made her choices. My father replied that he agreed. He added that they needed to protect Travis's position in the business and avoid creating obligations they couldn't afford. Then came the message I eventually printed: "We keep it civil, we don't burn the bridge completely. If the ranch ever turns into something, we'll want the door left open." I read those words 3 times at my kitchen table in Cedar Hollow while morning sunlight came through the window above the sink. My twins, now 9 years old, were eating cereal just 20 feet away. They hadn't forgotten me because they were grieving. They hadn't made a painful decision in a difficult moment. They had made a calculated business decision. To them, I was an investment that had lost value. Keep it, don't throw it away completely. Check again later if it becomes profitable. I printed the email, not for court, not as evidence, but so I'd always have something physical reminding me of the truth. I never wanted a holiday, a kind phone call, or a moment of loneliness to make me mistake their strategy for love. I folded the paper, placed it in my nightstand drawer, walked back into the kitchen, and smiled. Who wants more cereal? The offer didn't appear overnight. By year 7, the Callaway quarter-horse operation in Cedar Hollow, Texas, had 43 horses in active training, an 18-month waiting list for breeding services, and had produced 9 AQHA World Show qualifiers. We had been featured twice in Quarter Horse News and later in a Wall Street Journal article about successful boutique agricultural businesses. That article brought more phone calls than I could keep up with. One of them came from Meridian Land Partners, a Dallas development company represented by real estate attorney Jonathan Hale, who had spent 22 years handling agricultural acquisitions. He called one Thursday afternoon in October. His approach was calm, professional, and direct. He explained that Meridian wanted to build a conservation-focused luxury equestrian development in the Texas Hill Country and hoped to make my operation its centerpiece. He asked whether I'd consider discussing a sale. "I'm open to information," I told him, "not a decision." Just information. That conversation turned into 4 months of due diligence, 3 rounds of negotiations, and countless hours with my attorney, Patricia Reyes of Reyes Agricultural Law in Austin. With 3 decades of experience, she was one of the sharpest professionals I'd ever worked with. Patricia never celebrated anything until every document was signed and every dollar funded. She examined every clause in the acquisition agreement, challenged 3 provisions that would have left me with ongoing obligations, and successfully had each one rewritten. The final purchase price came to $100 million. I signed the paperwork on a Wednesday morning in Patricia's office in Austin. Afterward, she poured 2 glasses of whiskey from the bottle she kept in her bottom drawer for major closings and said, "You built something remarkable." I thought about Daniel. I thought about Walt and Ruth. I thought about that BP parking lot. I thought about the porch light. "A lot of people helped build it," I answered. Before the public announcement or any celebration, I spent the following week working with Patricia and Thomas Wicker, a trust and estate attorney with 34 years of experience, whom she recommended to handle the legal structure before anyone learned the sale price. We prepared 3 documents. The first created an irrevocable trust for Claire and James, carefully structured so no lawsuit, legal claim, or future challenge could ever reach it. Thomas had spent decades protecting family wealth from complex legal attacks. He completed mine in just 2 weeks and told me it was as secure as he knew how to make it. When I signed it that Friday afternoon, I felt a weight lift from my chest. The second document was a deed. The original 80 acres Walt and Ruth had given Daniel and me as a wedding present, the land where everything had begun, was transferred back to them, free and clear. The deed included a permanent restriction preventing any future sale, along with a trust that would cover taxes, maintenance, and every living expense they might ever have. Ruth was 67, Walt was 71. For 8 years they had treated my children as their own grandchildren and loved me like a daughter, even after Daniel was gone. That land had always belonged with them. Thomas quietly guided me through the paperwork. When I finished signing, he looked up and said, "In 34 years of practice, I've never had a client give the land back." I told them, They gave it to me first. I created the Daniel Calloway Memorial Scholarship Foundation, funding scholarships for single parents raising children alone. Only Patricia Reyes, Thomas Wicker, and Marcus Torres knew before the celebration. Every document was signed before the press arrived. Around 300 people gathered at the ranch that Saturday in April. Walt and Ruth stood quietly among the crowd while my parents came uninvited, acting as though they had always supported me. They even took the front row seats. On stage, I thanked the people who had truly shown up for me. Then I asked Walt and Ruth to stand. I announced that the original 80 acres of Calloway land had been transferred back to them, free and clear for life. Because 8 years earlier they had given a grieving stranger and her children a home without conditions. The crowd stood and applauded. My mother sat frozen. Travis realized there was nothing left for him to claim, and my father looked at the ground. I simply said, "Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who showed up." When my mother accused me of humiliating the family, I answered quietly, "Mom, you turned the porch light off." She had no response. 6 months later, the trust was complete. Walt and Ruth finally owned the ranch they had cared for, Marcus became an equity partner, and my children continued growing up surrounded by love. My mother sent carefully written emails saying she was proud. Travis called once, but I never returned it. My father never contacted me. Every morning I sit on my porch in Cedar Hollow and remember the words Ruth said the night she took us in. "Set 2 more plates, they're ours now. No conditions, no expectations, just kindness." That's the whole story.